Hello and welcome to the Beer Jerk Beer of the Week Drink Along. I'm Luke and this week we are drinking Springwood from one of New Zealand's newest breweries. Well, it's a collaboration, it's from two breweries. So you have probably heard of Pacific Coast Brewing Co. We had their Tapawera, a really fantastic Pilsner, a couple of months ago. So this is also a Pilsner. And it's made in collaboration with Wheelhouse Brewing in British Columbia, in Canada. And the two breweries bonded over having a similar landscape and lots of pine trees, seemingly, because it's a Pilsner made with pine needles. Cheers. I was up at Pacific Coast last week. It's a really impressive site. It's up in Mangawhai. And it's a big brewery site there in a big shed, and they've got some vineyards on site, but the rest of it is still under development. So they're planning that this Christmas time they will have a bar and restaurant, which is going to be really cool and a really nice location. It's where a lot of Aucklanders in particular have their holiday homes. So they'll be spending a lot of time there this summer, and it's going to fly if they've got some decent food there. The beers are very, very good, and it's in a beautiful location, just a little bit inland. So yeah, exciting times for them, and I'm sure they're working their asses off to pull everything together to get that tap room ready in time. But in the meantime, they definitely are working their asses off, cranking out quite a lot of releases. So Pacific Coast was started by a chap called Adam, who has a history of working with maps and surveying and charting. So a lot of the labels and artwork, it's inspired by the Pacific Ocean, and this is a collaboration. This is the most recent of quite a few collaborations they've done with breweries that are located around the Pacific Rim. So they've just released a Hawaiian beer, and yeah, they've done maybe 5 different collaborations so far, which is a really cool idea that I don't think anyone's really done before, because obviously the Pacific Rim gives you quite a lot of room to collaborate with lots of people across many different countries. And the brewer there is a chap called Sam Williamson, who has been with them from I was going to say the outset, but before the outset, just as they were imagining the brewery. So he's behind the construction of the whole site and putting everything together. So as I say, it's a real spanking, sparkling brewery, and it was really cool to get a bit of a glimpse of it when I popped up to see them last week. And so Sam famously used to brew at Sawmill Brewing, so obviously a very good pedigree, and yeah, really good at these hoppy beers. So as I say, we had the Tapawera previously, which was a really good light-bodied, real hop-forward beer, and this is it's a big hoppy West Coast, pretty resinous Pilsner, and a lot of people have been really enjoying these West Coast Pilsners recently. As they've got the light body to them, they're not hazy. It's a beer that really champions the hops without being too overly malty. So it's bitter, it's resinous, and it's made with quite a lot of pine needles. I'm not sure exactly where they got the pine needles from, but obviously there are lots of pine trees around New Zealand. And the hops in here, there's a real nice amount of, it is Motueka, Ruaka, and Muteri. So brilliant trio of New Zealand hops that are pretty hard to come by in British Columbia. A lot of brewers around the world, they really struggle to get hold of New Zealand hops because they're just in short supply basically. So us New Zealand drinkers are so lucky to be able to get hold of all these beers with Ruaka, Nelson Sauvin, these new experimental hops, things like Nectaron. The international breweries, the populations of more than 5 million people and much bigger audiences of drinkers, need to make much bigger batches. So New Zealand hop farms have been growing exponentially in the past 5 years, really, really cranking and ramping up the amount of hops they're putting out, but still there's nowhere near enough New Zealand hops to satisfy the demand in North America, in Europe and around the world for these hops. So really cool to be able to try a beer like this. We get to try loads of beers like this because we're lucky to be living here in New Zealand. So I think the pine needles work really nicely. A lot of these sort of kind of old school West Coast IPAs have a really piney, resinous hop forward profile anyway. So the pine needle character really works well. And I actually haven't had many beers made with pine needles. I'm planning to brew one myself at some point soon because I just think it's a really great addition. And it's cool when you get adjuncts in a beer that they just really complement the hops. So obviously grapefruit is a really great addition to use in IPAs, or oranges, things like that. That it's an extra addition that really complements the flavors of the beer, rather than something just for the sake of it, to pour loads and loads of passion fruit juice in. This is something that works with it, and it's interesting that we're just so used to adjuncts in everything these days. But it wasn't that long ago that there was a real real sense amongst traditional brewers and drinkers and real ale drinkers in England that this new world of craft beer, that you just chucked all sorts of weird things in. And I definitely remember a lot of drinkers being kind of offended at the idea of putting cocoa in a stout, or coffee in a stout, or pine needles or grapefruits in a hoppy beer. So it's nice that that's sort of accepted now, because it's not really a new thing. I was talking to a friend at the bar from Run Club last week, who she was telling me that she only liked drinking really traditional beers, the sort of beers that monks would brew, or the sort of beers that would be made in Germany 500 years ago. And I had to point out that in Germany 500 years ago, there were lots of salted gozers being made. And 500 years ago, hops weren't really cultivated all that much. So there would have been a lot of groots and people making beers with things like cardamom and sage and definitely orange zest. So all kinds of herbs were added to beers. So pine needles, of course, have been used in Scandinavian brewing for a very long time. And beers like Sati, so the whole sort of farmhouse brewing scene in Norway, Lithuania. Yeah, pine needles are nothing new whatsoever. But anyway, this is a fantastic beer, really cool collaboration. It's the first beer that I've tried from Wheelhouse, so it would be nice to go to British Columbia and go and visit those guys, and really cool on the Pacific Coast to be doing some interesting collaborations. So good work, team, great beer. I think all of you drinkers are really going to enjoy this week. In other news, we have just launched the Spring Drop at Beer Jerk. So this is the box that Joe and I have been working hard on pulling together, with a whole bunch of, well, a few classic favourites in here. Copacabana and Paradise, the best pale ale in New Zealand, the best brew type, well, probably the only brew type IPA that's still around, but amazing IPA from Urban Hort. I was there having a burger at the weekend and I had a Copacabana. I just can't get past that beer. GC Hazy, Chinchilla, you may not have had any beers from them. Really cool seeing this back from the guys at Choice Bros. It is a peanut butter raspberry English ale that was a real big beer in the early days of Choice Bros, and it's a beer I haven't had for years, so I saw they're re-releasing that and I was like, we've got to get this in. This is the Ton, little brewery called Small Gods, you may have heard of. It's a big imperial stout made with a metric ton of malt. Lakeman Primate Pilsner, another classic that's really, it's a really well-made hoppy Pilsner. We've got Abandon's West Coast IPA. We've got what's golden. It is a Kolsch, really nicely made Kolsch from Rhyme and Reason, always do good stuff. What is this? Hexenhaus, Small Gods. A German Roggen beer. You may know I'm a bit of a fan of historic German styles. This really interesting double hazy, where the wild hops grow from Mount, who have been doing some awesome stuff recently. Probably one of my favorite brewers, Mount and Choice Bros, are some of the most innovative brewers around. A hazy, obviously, from these guys who do just really great cool range, good everything. And another old classic that's back is Saison Sauvin from 8 Wired. Tom, the ref, dropped off a can of this the other day, and it is as great as it ever was. An absolute classic from 8 Wired, so really cool to see this back. So buy the Spring Drop. It's beerjet.co.nz, and we'll ship it out to you straight away. Thank you for joining us. See you next time. Cheers.